My name's Bud Stonebraker and I'm running for mayor. I was born and raised on the North Shore of Oahu. I was born in Wahiawa General Hospital many years ago, and I was raised just next to Sunset Beach where my dad started his surfboard shaping company back in the early 70s. My dad shaped for lightning bolt surfboards. Got here in the 60s and he was part of that whole historic era that Hawaii experienced, and we lived right there. He surfed Pipeline, Sunset, all those spots, so that was my backyard growing up. Wonderful upbringing, I loved it.
Why are you running for mayor of Honolulu?
Well, one of my greatest concerns is what I've seen happening in our state as far as the COVID narrative. And I've talked about this a lot. It's something that is very concerning because what has happened is we've had this threat, this virus, and we were all concerned at first. There was the goal that we were told to flatten the curve, but we watched the medical emergency facilities and none of them were really overrun except for some of the things that were happening in New York. And we know that they had problems because they were putting their sick people in care homes with the elderly who were being infected. And so those numbers were spiked. And of course, the money was involved. If hospitals had a quote COVID case, they would get somewhere around $13,000 to $39,000 from the government. So a lot of the cases were being told by the higher ups, make sure that you say COVID so we get more money. So there was a lot of corruption, skewed numbers. But then we began to see with the antibody tests that many people had caught the disease, passed it, without even being aware that they were sick. They were asymptomatic. They didn't get sick. In fact, some of the numbers that came back from California showed that the actual fatality rate was 0.1% to 0.2%, comparable with like a bad flu season. And so all of a sudden, this narrative of locking everybody down and tracing them and tracking them and waiting, sheltered in place until a vaccine was made, began to be suspicious to me and many other people. And we felt that this was almost a kind of a dark attempt to take our freedoms away. Even now, the governor has declared emergency powers over the state. He can rule as an executive without the legislature. He's really not, by our Constitution, supposed to be making laws. That's the job of the legislature. And yet, in times of emergency, we've allowed for this. But that emergency window is only 60 days. And the governor has to reprove that there is an emergency to continue past that. Now, he's continued past that almost 100 days. And we wonder where the legislature is. Why are they not standing up? Why are the courts not standing up? There are a couple of court cases in the works right now. And we'll see how the judges rule on that. And yet we're living under this sort of threat. Now, just because the government is not enforcing these stay-at-home orders, these mandates, these social distancing, they can. And if they can hold a $5,000 ticket and up to 1 year in jail over every citizen of the state of Hawaii, that is very scary. And we have to be concerned for civil liberties, and especially when we see that this virus is not nearly as bad. And I looked at this the other day, and I have it on my computer here. The CDC tells us that every year there are coronavirus cases different than this novel coronavirus, but there are 4 types of coronavirus that commonly infect people. And these make up 20% of the colds that we experience. Sometimes you'll go to the doctor, you get a cold, and he or she will tell you, well, it's a viral infection. And that might be a rhinovirus or another virus. But 20% of the time, the common cold is caused by 4 main coronaviruses. And there are 3 others that are more deadly: MERS, SARS-CoV-1, and SARS-CoV-2. But we need to understand in our culture and society that we already have coronaviruses in us. But the media is hyping up this sense of fear, and they're not reporting many of the truths about this thing to alleviate the culture's fear. And the government is ramping up on top of that to keep people afraid, suspicious. We're conditioning people to stand in lines and to have their temperature taken. They're telling us that if you have a baby and you're COVID positive, they are going to take your baby away from you. My neighbor told me that they tested her for that. And if you think it can't happen, you just have to look at the news. It's a woman in Canada. She tested positive for COVID, and they gave her a C-section, and she didn't see her child for 55 days. 55 days. They breach that sacred bond between mother and child for an illness that, though it is different, I recognize that COVID-19 is not the flu, but it has the same fatality rate. It is primarily focused on the elderly people. The median age of death with COVID is about 82 to 83 years old. So when you see all of these things happening and you see the science open up and explain to us that it's not as scary as the media and the government are telling us, we have to be concerned for our civil liberties. And that's what I want to do in Hawaii. I want to be a mayor that has sense and common sense to say some of these measures that the governor and other mayors have put into place, they seem to be part of an agenda, and it's not for the freedom and the favor of the people of Hawaii. So as you can tell, I'm emotional, passionate about this. I believe that the people of Hawaii deserve better and that they deserve freedom, and that if we don't act now, our economy could implode and we could have a disastrous decade ahead of us.
Why should people vote for you instead of somebody else?
Well, that's a good question. I guess you just have to compare candidates. I believe that most of the other candidates are either retreads or insiders. I know many of them. I like them as people, but I think that they're fundamentally the wrong thing for the state of Hawaii and the city of Honolulu at this time. Because they're going to have the same old agendas with the same old friends and the same old connections. And many of those insiders have been part of this game for a long time. And they will owe somebody something when they get in office. They have special interests that are getting them into these positions. They have lots of money. They have lots of hype, and they have professional campaigns. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think the people of Hawaii want something authentic and something real. And I was born and raised here. I love this place. I had a little bit of experience in politics 2 decades ago. I didn't like it because of the politics. And I had other things to do, and I've been growing kalo, and I'm a pastor of a church out here in Waimanalo. I love doing those things. But I felt such an urgency that somebody steps up to try to be the voice for the common people, and not the voice of particular or special interests or causes. When I get into office, I want to do the essential things that the mayor should do. We need to pave our roads. We need to upgrade our water systems. We need to pick up the trash, take care of the police, and deal with a lot of zoning issues that we have in this city. And if we do that, we can open up areas for diversification in agriculture or affordable housing, low density, and lands that can be used for farming and agriculture. I believe in these things, and even though my initial desire to get in is just basically for freedom and aloha, I believe that the government is casting this cloud of fear and suspicion over people, and it's strangling that family affection. You can't go visit your grandmother on her deathbed. I mean, I have a friend, his dad is 94 years old, and yesterday he thought it would be the last Father's Day that he could spend with him, and the yearly lunch that they had for Father's Day was interrupted by plexiglass and all of these drastic measures, and that moment is stolen from him. And that's not right. It's not pono. It's not good that we do these things in society. It's not good that we create this suspicion and fear. So I think any one of those other candidates, if they're functioning in that narrative, and I call it an echo chamber because no matter what information they get, they still turn it so that the same results are at the end. And that is tracing people, following them around, letting Google and Apple and the government have all your medical information. All your privacy will be gone. And after that, if this narrative keeps going, they've told us that they will come to people's homes, knock on the door, and test. And if anybody in that house has COVID, they will take them from the house to a medical encampment or a unit, a quarantine station. Now, these are just frightening images that we have, especially for a virus that has the same or similar fatality rate to the flu. It's between the flu and the measles. It's a sickness that should not warrant these kinds of encroachments on the rights of the people of Hawaii. That's my first issue. I get that. And that's my biggest issue. And that's the reason I say, If none of these other candidates are talking about these things, they do not deserve your trust and your voice. Because I am the only candidate that is telling the truth about this issue. And this is crucial. If we don't recognize the truth about this issue, any leadership within that framework, that paradigm, will be crippled by the inability to have our economy open, but also with the restrictions of human rights. If we treat our visitors like prisoners, where one of the candidates suggested that they get locked in their hotel room for 2 weeks without getting a key. And they even suggested that we would put ankle monitors, a la Alcatraz, prison kind of a system and a state. How in the world can an economy move forward if visitors are not made welcome, or if the nail salon has to do a virtual medical checkout on you just to do your nails? Or at a restaurant, you have to wear a mask to go to your table and then get up to wear a mask and go to the bathroom. And nobody's following even the mask guidelines. All of these things are oppressive, and they're based on something that is fundamentally flawed. And so that's the first issue. But beyond that, I really believe that we have an opportunity in Hawaii with this situation to really look at what our core government does. And we know that in the city of Honolulu for many years there has been graft and there has been corruption. We've seen it tragically in the police department. There are officials that are currently under investigation right now in our city government. We have a chance to shine some light into this situation where we have to be honest about the rail. We have to be honest about the fact that we import mangoes from Peru and bananas from Ecuador. We do not have a sustainable food supply here. And we have to change things for the regular people, the people that are just trying to feed their families and go to work and to provide. We cannot be dependent on the fossil fuels that are bringing these ships or these planes. I believe that we should have grown, not flown foods. We need food that we grow ourselves. And we can do some of those things with some changes that we make in the Department of Planning and Permitting. With some changes, we have an opportunity. We're going to have a budget shortfall. And right now, the state is trying to borrow more money rather than reducing what is oftentimes a bloated and oversized government, which essentially puts burdens upon small businesses and the average citizen so much so that it makes their life wilt under the oppression. And if we can get into the city and release some of those things so that people can go to work and they can use their ingenuity and their creativity. People ask me about, being mayor. If you're the mayor, how are you going to diversify the economy, or how are you going to do this? And I just say, the job of the mayor is not to do those things. The people will do those things as long as the mayor and the city government gets off their backs. People are creative. They will rebuild this economy. The government will stand back and watch and just do everything it can do to facilitate the good, hardworking people of this city. Now, if we go in their direction, it's going to be loans. We're going to have to pay. We're going to have deficits for years. The economy will clunker along. It won't get going. And so we have a great chance to change things in Hawaii for the better. I mean, look at what's happened with the rail. All the functions of road renovations and the water mains, even the bus system is being cannibalized by the needs of the rail. It's hurting our whole city. And now we have another 4 miles to go, and that's a whole issue in itself. But we have to recognize that the people need to come first. And that's what I think that I bring to the table. I don't owe anybody anything. And I'm not interested in making a career for myself. I'm not ambitious. I'm not looking for higher office. And I'm not very interested in making a fortune. I don't need to be rich. I'm satisfied with my little kalo farm and having some people in our fellowship out here in Waimanalo. I don't want to have political clout, except that it might enable me to help the people of Hawaii. If I can relieve people of the burden of a corrupt government or an inept government, then I would just be happy to do that. That's all I want to do. So.
What did Hawaii do right with the COVID-19 crisis?
Well, I think initially we did everything that we thought. See, the crisis was based upon a couple of things. The World Health Organization said that the fatality rate of COVID would be 3.4%. Now that is serious, very serious. That's 3.4 people out of 100. Now the flu is one person out of 1,000, basically. But if we had, 3.5 people, 3 to 4 people out of 100, that would be a major crisis. So based on this imperial model that was developed by a guy by the name of Neil Ferguson, maybe you remember him, he was the one that didn't follow his own quarantine rules when he crossed the city to sleep with the girl he's having an affair with. But he created this model that said 500,000 people in England would die, 2.2 million people in America would die. It's this dramatic thing. And so we put all of these lockdowns in place based on that. And that was right. Because if those models were correct, we needed to do everything that we could do. And we all did it. We all social distanced. We were all careful. But then they moved the goalposts. We weren't flattening the curve, because what I think happened was the truth came out that it wasn't as deadly as they said. But now they had, if that was the truth, then they wouldn't have any leverage to keep control over people. And when I talk about this, it's weird, because 6 months ago, I could never imagine something like this, but it's so diabolical that the initial reaction, what we did was right, but the subsequent science and information and journals begin to prove that those models were severely flawed, and we needed to update that. But in Hawaii, they didn't do it, and we've been going on for 5 months now under the same mentality, but it's wrong. It's just flat out wrong. So I think we started right, but I think we didn't adjust, and we remained in a certain narrative for too long.
What do you see as Hawaii's strengths, as well as the main problems you will have to tackle as mayor, and how will you be handling them?
Well, I think that if we don't get our economy back on track, that we will have a mass exodus of good people from our state. We have long trusted in tourism to be a driver of our economy, and it has been. And it will be. Now, people are saying during this crisis it's a chance to diversify the economy. No, you don't do that. Imagine you're in a boat, you're out in the water, and there's a hole, and you're taking on water, you're beginning to sink. You're going down, and you have a bucket, and you can bail that water right away. But you also have a bilge pump. It's still in its crate. It's got, words on it. You would have to pry it open. You'd have to look at the manual. You'd have to piece it together, and you would have a bilge pump, but it would take hours, maybe, a day to put together. The bucket is tourism. We've had it for a long time. We can bail this water out. We can restart our sputtering economy. We're like in a plane that's nosediving. The engine it's almost out. But if we open the throttle and we let tourism come back in, it will breathe a breath of life into our economy so that we can diversify. Diversifying right now would be like trying to put that bilge pump together. You just don't have time. If we don't do something about the economy now, what we'll face is, well, just imagine Detroit. Imagine the abandoned streets, the overgrown parks, the graffiti and the boarded up windows, and just a skeleton, a ghost town of a place that has been so devastated by poor leadership. That could happen in Hawaii. My friends, I have a few friends that work for, they're longshoremen, and they work on the docks, and they see these ships coming in, and they told me, Bud, it's really weird to see container ships coming in half full, 1/3 full. They used to be stacked, 8 or 9 high, and now they're coming in 4 or 5 high. See, our supply lines have been interrupted. The people of Hawaii are kind of not feeling the pinch yet, because there's still food in the food bank. But all that is going to run out, and there's still money coming in by way of stimulus, but people don't know that they're going to be taxed for that. They're on the hook for that at the end of the year. But that's going to run out. And if we don't restart this economy, certain planes are going to stop flying to Honolulu. They won't have enough passengers. And so the consequences of not taking action immediately on the economy could be catastrophic and devastating. So that's the first thing, and that's the most important thing above everything else.
Prior to the COVID-19 crisis, we had some very expensive projects going here on the island. We had rail, there was a proposed new prison in Halava, proposed new stadium, and there was problems with the floundering retirement system. How did these projects fit into your plans?
Well, each one of those projects is great in its idea and its desire. Wouldn't it be great to have a new stadium? It'd be great. It'd be wonderful. Wouldn't it be great to have the rail coming all the way in to Ala Moana? Wouldn't it be great to have a place where we need a new dump? We need to take care of our prison population. All of those things are very important, but if we don't do the first things, we won't succeed in doing those things. If the city government cannot pave its roads, then there's really no expectation from the people to trust them to build a stadium or a prison or to finish the rail correctly. I sometimes tell people that what I'm running to be is the janitor-in-chief. That we have so many ambitious projects, but we can't even pick up the abandoned cars in our neighborhoods. When I drive around my area, I can see 50 to 100 cars within a mile of my house. It's a tragic shame. Some people ask about diversifying the economy and climate change and global warming, and I think, why is the city going to be an authority on fixing these global issues when it can't even clean up its own trash? The mayor needs to fix the roads. That's all he needs to do. The mayor needs to support its police department and make sure that there's transparency and accountability so that we can have closure to this scandal that rocked our police officers and our Honolulu Police Department over the past few years. These are the things the mayor needs to do. I have a plan for the rail. The next 4 miles are going to be incredibly more delicate as we dig down for foundations and pilings for the rail support. Now we're going to be getting into an area with buildings. The previous 16 miles, and by the way, up to Middle Street, it's about 90% finished, and we believe that it could be up and running as soon as 2022. We need to finish that so that the people of Hawaii can use it. Instead of these dreams that we're going to finish in another 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, these next 4 miles are so delicate and complicated that the cost overruns aren't going to be from 4.7 billion to 9 billion. It's going to go triple and quadruple. So we need to finish what we've started and wait until we have further ambitious projects, because we don't know what our economy is going to do. And if the city budget isn't filled, I'm not going to raise taxes, and I'm not going to get loans. The city budget has to do the same thing with everybody that it represents. If you have less money, you're going to have to spend less money. We can't just keep an inflated size of our government. We have to realize that we can't do all these dreams that we might have had in our minds. But what we can do is we can pick up the trash on time, and we can pave our roads on time, and we can pay our police department the right rates and give them the training and the support that they need, and we can deal with people who are trying to get a permit so that they can build a unit in their backyard so that their auntie can move in. We can do these things, and those are the things that I want to do.
You were in the Hawaii State House from 2000 to 2006, correct?
Yeah.
What district were you representing?
Well, when I first ran, it was House District 15, and I had only started. I was like most people. I thought, why vote? These guys are all the same. But I realized I needed to vote. So the first time I voted for the representative that was there. He was a Democrat by the name of David Stegmeyer. I thought he was doing good.
By the way, where's District 15?
Oh, this is District 15 at the time was in Hawaii Kai, Aina area. Not that far out, but Haiheoni and just that whole area. Later it turned into District 17. But I voted 1 year, and then 2 years later he was retiring, and the seat was open. And I thought that it was important for people to be involved in politics. I wanted to be an example for my kids and my friends that, hey, we should make a difference. So I ran. It was an open seat, and there were 9 people in that race, and I ended up winning. So I got in office, and I didn't know a whole lot about politics. And the process, what do they say about politics? Lawmaking is kind of like sausage making. You might enjoy it at the end, but you don't want to see how it's being done. It's political, and that was one of the things that I didn't really enjoy about it. I didn't like being put on one side of an aisle or another. I didn't like some of the backroom deals. I didn't like the way that committee hearings were held, where all the people testifying in favor of more and more programs and things, they were all testifying while on the job. They were being paid by the government to testify to the government. And mom and pop and the aunties that were there for a cause that they believed in, they had to feed the meters all day. They had to take off work. They had to find childcare. And it just seemed like the system was out of balance and unjust. And so I decided to move on after that. And after 2006, we just focused on our relief work in other countries and on our ministry and on the farm that we have now in Waimanalo. So yeah, 2000 to 2006. The old days, I remember those times.
How have those problems in the legislature played out on those issues? Are they still pretty much there?
Well, politics is politics. Here's the fundamental issue. It's really hard to have change and healthy growth in the changing of the power structure in the legislature when you just have a one-party system. There's just really no way that there can be a balance, because it's just a blowout every game, and so really many of the voices of the people of Hawaii, they're not always being heard. So there's always a political aspect of it. And so one of the things that we did do, of the few accomplishments that I had, we were able to end the difficult quarantine process when people brought their pets into Hawaii. Let's say one of your kids went away to college and they were given a golden retriever or a Labrador or something like that, or any dog. They just fell in love. They wanted to bring that dog home. Well, in the old days, you had to put that dog in sort of a doggy prison for 6 months in a Hawaii quarantine facility. And we updated that. We lobbied and with a number of people that were mindful, and we were able to allow people to take their cats or their dogs when they get off the airplane with proof of vaccination and blood tests. They were able to take them directly home. We were able to completely end the animal quarantine in the state of Hawaii. And when I think back to that, I realize, you can do some good things by being involved. And that's one of the good things that I did. I'm a big pet lover. I love my dogs. I've had dogs my whole life. And growing up, we had tons of cats too. But that's one area where people don't want to be separated from their loved animals. And I think if we can end the quarantine on pets, we should end the quarantine on people. We shouldn't have to be separated from our loved ones. Some of these measures, they're beyond their scope of what's necessary. And so, you can do some good things. But I think it really takes an outside voice and somebody that's coming in with common sense. Many of the people in the departments of the city or the state, they've been in those departments for 30 years. And they don't even have experience in the real world about the things that they're making policy over. So we need a fresh perspective and a fresh voice.
With a minority of the population in Hawaii being Christian, many are prejudiced against pastors and Christianity and will be inclined not to vote for you because of that. What do you have to say to them?
I understand that. I'm not running to be the pastor of Honolulu, but we should recognize that the form of government that we have is based upon the Magna Carta, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights. And those documents are documents that enshrine the values that give us our freedom. In the Declaration, it says that we understand, we believe that all people are created equal and they have their rights from their creator. And governments are formed to protect those rights. You see, the government doesn't give you your rights. You have those rights. But we believe that you have those rights because you're created in the image of God. That simply means that every person has unique and amazing value just by virtue that they are alive. So with that approach to government, human rights are primary and freedom is fundamental. And so we believe that this is the best way to lead people forward. And I want freedom for everybody, not just people to think like me. I want people to think like they want to think, because without freedom, you can't forum. And it's within the forum where we have a free exchange of ideas. I want people to have differing opinions, but we can't have differing opinions unless we have that shelter, that shield, that umbrella of freedom itself. And that comes with the form of government that we have. That much of it is based on, the Old Testament scriptures, the Ten Commandments, Maimonides, many different philosophers from that era and beyond. So we have a great form of government. And if people value freedom, then I think I'm their candidate. I'm certainly not running to promote our church in any way. That's not my interest. People do different things. Sometimes I have to mow the lawn, and sometimes I have to clean the toilet. That's my job sometimes. And if my job as a pastor, I love to mow the lawn, but on occasion my wife tells me, you got to get in and clean that toilet. That's what I'm doing here. The city government is a toilet that needs to be cleaned. And I'll do the job. I just want to clean it up. I want to do the best I can. I'm not even sure I want to run for a second term if I was elected. That's premature to say that, but I'm not interested in a career in politics. I just want to clean this up and move forward. And so I hope that's what you like.
Is there anything we haven't covered that you would like to add?
Oh, I'm sure there's lots of things I could talk about. But, well, I just want to ask if I could speak to you directly. I'm a local boy. I have some experience in politics. I've traveled the world. I've done relief work in the former Soviet Union, in South Sudan, before it was South Sudan, in Cambodia with the orphanages that we support there in the killing fields of Pol Pot. I've seen government at its best here in America and its worst in other places of the world. I am authentic. I am flawed. I am not a perfect person. I'll probably make mistakes. I'll probably say things to make people upset, but what you see is what you get. And I'm not running for anybody else except for you. I'm running for you and your family because I want Hawaii to be a place of aloha, and I want Hawaii to be a place, the kind of place that I grew up in, the best place in the world. And so I hope that you'll entrust me with your vote, and I look forward to seeing you in office. Aloha.